welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I'm your host, Catherine Hadro, in our Washington, D.C. studio. Thank you for joining us. In this week's show, we speak with a pro-life Catholic U.S. representative about upcoming pro-life legislation. Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg tells a pro-life Democrat there's no room for her views in the party. And this.
It's just time. It's time that our culture hears the stories of women like me who survive abortions.
Abortion attempt survivor Melissa Ohden was just on the 2020 March for Life rally stage. She updates us with the latest on her journey. But first, our top story, President Donald Trump made history last week as the first U.S. president to attend the annual March for Life.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Jeannie. It is my profound honor to be the first president in history to attend the March for Life. We're here for a very simple reason: to defend the right of every child, born and unborn, to fulfill their God-given potential.
In the historic speech, President Trump highlighted his pro-life achievements, pointed to the Democrats' extreme abortion agenda, and thanked the pro-life crowds for their life-affirming work for women in need. Tens of thousands of pro-lifers packed onto the Washington, D.C. National Mall to hear the speech before marching down Constitution Avenue to peacefully protest Roe v. Wade, the 1973 Supreme Court decision legalizing abortion nationwide. The 47th annual March for Life rally also featured speeches from House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, two pro-life female Democrats, Louisiana First Lady Donna Hutto Edwards, and Louisiana State Senator Katrina Jackson, and Susan B. Anthony List President Marjorie Dannenfelser. Also on the morning of the March for Life, news broke that Dannenfelser will co-chair Pro-Life Voices for Trump National Advisory Board in 2020. The group, comprised of dozens of national and state pro-life leaders, aims to mobilize support for President Trump. And joining us now is Mallory Quigley, Vice President of Communications for the Susan B. Anthony List, the very pro-life group Dannenfelser leads. And we're also joined by Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute and a member of the newly formed Pro-Life Voices for Trump National Advisory Board. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, first off, historic March for Life last week. What are your thoughts on President Trump's speech, Rachel?
Well, I think what made it really meaningful was first that he was there, right? First president ever to address the March for Life. But I think the second thing is that it's been backed up by so much action. And this is something that I think pro-lifers really appreciate about President Trump, is just how amazing his administration has been on these issues. And it really separates him, I think, from a lot of Republicans who run on pro-life issues, but then the lack of follow-through, has been something we've noticed. For President Trump, this is a black and white issue. There is no gray, and he has taken it, I think, all the way through. We've seen more pro-life gains out of this administration than any, certainly in my lifetime, and I would say in the modern generation, he's been one of the best, if not the best.
Yes, I would totally agree with Rachel that he was greeted like a pro-life hero, because he is one. I mean, just look at the pro-life accomplishments that have come out of this administration, and he deserved every ounce of applause and cheers that he got on Friday. It was really exciting.
Well, let's take a listen to some of what President Trump had to say at the March for Life.
They are coming after me because I am fighting for you, and we are fighting for those who have no voice, and we will win because we know how to win.
How much can we expect to hear this kind of messaging in 2020 with President Trump really identifying himself as part of the pro-life movement? Mallory?
Yeah, I think that he's the leader of the pro-life movement in the White House, and he's going to continue to talk about this issue. He knows that it's something that not only his base voter support, but also this is an area for him to connect with on people that might disagree with him on other issues, immigration, healthcare. This is the common sense pro-life legislative priorities that have been put forward by the pro-life movement that the president's embraced and worked on are, 60, 70, 80% issues that a majority of Americans support. So it'll be no surprise to hear him continue to talk about this on the campaign trail. He's got a lot to talk about in terms of accomplishments, especially on conscience protections like he was mentioning, and the Supreme Court. I mean, the our opponents know what's at stake this election, and that's absolutely why they've come after the president in such a strong way.
Yeah, I do think it's important for him to make these points, and I think you'll continue to hear them in response to just how far the left has gone on this issue. And I think that's what makes this election so critical. You are literally seeing Democrats supporting infanticide. 44 Senate Democrats went to the Senate floor and voted against a bill that would have given care to a baby born alive after a botched abortion. We're not talking about, months of gestation at this point. We're talking about a baby born alive, and this is now a mainstream position for the left. I mean, they want to shout your abortion and they want to celebrate all these things. And so I think Trump is responding to the sea change, at least on the right, that people are stepping up and paying attention because these issues shake the earth for people who care about pro-life. They're seeing just how radical these leftists are, which makes what President Trump is doing so much more important.
And Mallory, it is your boss, Marjorie Dannenfelser, who is now co-chair of the recently announced Pro-Life Voices for Trump National Advisory Board. She held this role back in 2016. Explain how and why this advisory board was formed.
Right. Well, in 2016, we didn't have the record that we have now with the president. And so, the campaign came to Marjorie to say, we know that you can rally the pro-life grassroots. And she asked for commitments. And that's where we got that letter from then candidate Trump promising, to defund Planned Parenthood, to advance the Pain Capable bill, appoint pro-life Supreme Court justices, and to protect the Hyde Amendment. And that served as the working to-do list of this administration. Now we have all of the gains that have been made, and the job of the coalition is that much easier. But we took that letter door to door with our canvassing operation in 2016, and now we have the entire record of the administration to run on.
And Rachel, you were named a member of this pro-life advisory board. What's your message to pro-life Americans in 2020?
So I think two things, and the first is for younger women. There are articulate, empowered, intelligent pro-life women. The left loves to paint us as somehow just taking orders from someone or ill-informed, but no, we are passionate, we are knowledgeable, and we are pro-life. And second, I also think, just putting the stakes out there. Democrats are no longer the party of safe, legal, and rare abortion. They are the party of abortion on demand up until and after the moment of birth. In my home state of New York, has it on the books now. Right. You can have an abortion up until the moment and after of birth. This has never been a higher stakes issue. There are more pro-life millennials, I think, than any other generation. This generation I'm in, I'm an older millennial, but I'm still a millennial. And so I really want to speak to them and for them.
Also at Friday's historic March for Life was a video message from Vice President Mike Pence and his wife, Karen Pence, immediately after meeting Pope Francis. And this was actually taped at EWTN's Rome Bureau. And Vice President Pence then exclusively spoke with EWTN News after that message. Let's take a listen to the part of that interview.
For my wife and me to stand for life in the public square is a calling. It's a calling of our convictions. It's a calling of our faith. We think it's the most pressing moral issue of our time. And throughout our years in Congress and as a governor and now as vice president, I've sought to stand for the right to life and to stand with all of those who cherish the unborn.
The vice president is very familiar with the pro-life movement. What role does he play in upholding the pro-life agenda within the administration?
So I think Mike Pence has been a warrior on these issues for a very long time, and I think a lot of, evangelicals, conservative Catholics who weren't necessarily sure where President Trump was going to be on these issues because he was never a politician, he had no record. Mike Pence was a comfort to them because they were going to rely on his counsel. And I think now what we're seeing is we have not only one but two pro-life warriors in the White House. And I think that is of great comfort to those of us who really care about this issue. We have both of them fighting for life.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the vice president, when he was in Congress, going after taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry, standing up for babies with Down syndrome as governor of Indiana, and I absolutely agree with Rachel. It's very clear, especially the president's been signaling that with his appearance at the march on Friday, that this is an issue that deeply motivates both of them.
The March for Life was a busy news day. I'd like to get both of your reactions to other major pro-life news that broke. The Trump administration announced Friday it will take action against the state of California for violating federal law by requiring employers cover abortion in their employee health care plans. The Department of Health and Human Services will withhold some federal funding if the state does not end the mandate. And the Trump administration also reversed an Obama-era decision by granting the state of Texas a Medicaid waiver to fund the Healthy Texas Women program, which does not include Planned Parenthood. Mallory, can you break this down for us? How significant is this, especially the news coming from HHS concerning California?
Well, absolutely. This is once again the administration signaling their strong pro-life views, their support for conscience rights. California has 30 days to respond to this decision. This is something that pro-life advocates have fought for a long time. It's a gross violation of conscience to force religious organizations, religious schools to fund abortion on demand in their healthcare plans. So very exciting news coming out of HHS regarding California.
A busy pro-life news week coming from the March for Life week. Thank you both for being here. Mallory Quigley, Vice President of Communications for the Susan B. Anthony List, and Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Last week, President Donald Trump made history by becoming the first sitting president to attend the March for Life. And on that same historic day, the Trump administration announced it will take action against California for discriminating against organizations that do not cover abortion in their employee health care plans. The Trump administration also granted the state of Texas a Medicaid waiver to fund the Healthy Texas Women program, which does not include Planned Parenthood. These are all huge accomplishments for the pro-life movement, and that brings us to this week's call to action. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com to thank President Donald Trump for attending the March for Life and for taking pro-life action in California and Texas. Once you get to ProLifeWeekly.com, all you will do is type in some basic information so we can tailor this message directly to President Trump and his administration. Again, last week, President Trump became the first president in history to attend the March for Life, and he also made major pro-life strides. His presence at the largest pro-life event in the world forced more media attention and set a new precedent for future pro-life administrations. To send your thank you to President Trump, go to ProLifeWeekly.com. Turning now to our next segment, we're still in the first month of 2020, but this year is proving to be an intense one for the pro-life issue, and it's especially uphill for the House of Representatives, which is under a pro-abortion Democratic leadership. To get a better idea of what the pro-life battle looks like in the House, we speak now with Representative Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska, who joins us from Capitol Hill. Congressman, welcome back to the show.
Catherine, great to talk to you again. Thanks for all of your good work.
Thank you. First off, I want to get your reaction to President Trump becoming the first U.S. president to attend the March for Life rally.
An amazing, amazing moment. You know, for years, I remember when I was a young student, President Reagan spoke to the March for Life remotely. I believe President Bush did the same thing. But to have a sitting United States president come out there on stage, address this in a most heartfelt way, this deep wound in the soul of America, but also encourage the tens of thousands of young people there, was deeply meaningful to me and so many others across the nation. Unprecedented, unbelievable. Great job, Mr. President. Thank you so much for your leadership.
Congressman, speaking of your leadership, you are on the House Appropriations Committee, which oversees government funding. As a pro-life congressman, what do you have to keep your eye out on for the Appropriations Committee?
Well, this is a very great question, because as the government spends, so the government does. That's an old expression that I invented a long time ago. You can talk about policy all day long, but what you put your money in is highly important. You know, we've seen some very good people in the administration, particularly the Secretary of Health and Human Services, actually elevate the idea of conscience rights and protection of people's religious perspective, as well as their deeply held sincere beliefs in healthcare, preventing people, for instance, from having to participate in abortion procedures, actually making grant-making systems fairer so that pro-life communities, people who have the reasoned scientific belief that the unborn child is worthy not only of dignity but also legal protection, not be forced into the participation of an act of abortion or even be proximate to it. These are the kinds of things that you work on to ensure that funding streams are going in the proper way. But look, we have a very big divide in the country. Planned Parenthood is significantly funded. They're the biggest abortion provider here and in the world, and it's a sad, sad reality. And while, again, you try to sequester money and move it toward more productive and better uses, noble uses, nonetheless, this is a deep, deep fight.
Do you have to keep a closer watch for pro-life concerns in budgeting, considering the Democratic House leadership?
Well, in general, even the appropriations culture until the last few years really wasn't pro-life, so there wasn't an attentiveness to this consideration as a part of the normal proceedings of the Appropriation Committee. But it's changed. It now is. Elections do matter. Elections have consequences. And so while we don't win every battle, nonetheless, mitigating the use of taxpayer money to underwrite the abortion industry, which is so devastatingly harmful to women and unborn child, is a key component of what many, many people on this side of the aisle believe, and it's reflected in the Appropriations Committee deliberation. Do we win every fight? No. Have we mitigated many bad things? Yes. Do we have a lot of work to do to convict our colleagues? Hey, in the very least, Americans agree that taxpayer money shouldn't be subsidizing the abortion industry. That's a widely held view among Americans, even Americans who identify as pro-choice. So that's something that we hold to and continue to hold up as a reasoned position, not a compromise position, but a reasoned position, while we actually also work to change hearts and minds in the culture.
Finally, speaking of being pro-life on Capitol Hill, as a Catholic pro-life congressman, what do you see as the top pro-life goal for the House of Representatives to strive towards?
Well, it's a two-edged issue. One is, again, you have to create the political preconditions in which there's legislative activity. And the country is so sadly divided over abortion that I think it's incumbent upon those of us who are not just in the legislature, but who are part of this bigger belief system that life, no matter how small, has dignity and is worthy of protection. You know, in our country, we have a fascinating and frankly beautiful political movement around a single word: tolerance, celebrating diversity, inviting those who may not have felt welcome before. But we exclude one group of people, them, the smallest, innocent, most vulnerable child in the womb and their mothers that carry them. That is a paradox and a contradiction that cannot be reconciled by young people particularly, who have a relational, empathetic desire to see everyone included. So we're making good progress in terms of shifting the mind and the heart and the culture, and this is really due to so many good young people. On the legislative front, though, that means, again, trying to argue that taxpayer money should not subsidize the abortion industry. That's one of the most important things we will do. Of course, there are other important bills out there that are harder to get through, but nonetheless, point to life beginning at conception, trying to stop abortion when a heartbeat is detected, trying to stop abortion when the unborn child can feel pain. Even people who may not accept the fullness of our view on the pro-life issue at conception, nonetheless should be able to consider that when an unborn child feels pain, maybe that's when the line for abortion at this point should be drawn. So there's a lot of legislative attempts to, again, keep this in the forefront of the conscience of the nation, so that one day it's not about a crisis pregnancy, it's about how we respond as a community to someone in need, a mother and their unborn child, and possibly the father as well. That's what's called solidarity. That's what we have to move toward. That's what young people are eager for in our country. That will heal this great wound and great divide that's called abortion, that's promulgated by the abortion industry.
I look forward to that day. Representative Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska, thank you for your time.
Pleasure to be with you, Catherine. Thank you so much.
When we come back,
To me, this just gives me hope to know that in the midst of whatever happens, God's will is being done.
abortion attempt survivor Melissa Ohden joins us to share the latest on her journey. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm your host, Catherine Hadro. Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg told a pro-life Democrat at a Fox News town hall he would not support updating the party's platform to include voters like her. That is this week's Speak Out segment. At the Sunday town hall broadcast, the executive director of Democrats for Life of America, Kristen Day, asked the former South Bend mayor if he would be open to including language in the Democratic Party platform that would allow a diversity of views on abortion. Buttigieg, while originally dodging the question, eventually replied he would reject that change.
I support the position of my party that this kind of medical care needs to be available to everyone. The best I can offer is that we may disagree on that very important issue, and hopefully we will be able to partner on other issues.
I am grateful Kristen Day pressed Buttigieg on that question so he would be forced to answer, and we as voters have a better idea of his extreme abortion agenda. The former South Bend mayor excused his views at the town hall by saying, quote, "If we can't agree on where to draw the line, the next best thing we can do is agree on who should draw that line." The Democratic presidential candidate is essentially saying because we don't all agree on the abortion issue, let's err on the side of those who have a voice instead of those who don't, the youngest among us. What an alarming rationale from the very man seeking highest office, the position responsible for protecting all American citizens at every stage in life. This is the same man who, during his time as South Bend mayor, vetoed a pregnancy care center's relocation. Protecting the unborn and supporting pregnant women should not be a partisan issue. But the Democratic Party establishment has committed to abortion on demand through all 9 months of pregnancy and to taxpayer funding for the procedures. The Democratic Party has forced this issue to be partisan. And refusing to even make allowances for pro-life Democratic voters, Pete Buttigieg demonstrated his commitment to abortion at any cost, even the cost of votes. Remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death. Follow this week's call to action. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com to thank President Trump for attending the March for Life. Melissa Ohden, an abortion attempt survivor, has found her voice and speaking up for the voiceless. Her witness of having survived a saline abortion is proving to be a powerful response to increasingly extreme abortion laws. So much so, she's now in the forefront of the pro-life movement, even taking to the 2020 March for Life rally stage just last week. We sat down with Ohden one day before the rally to hear the latest on her journey for this week's Pro-Life Focus. Melissa Ohden, it's a joy to see you again.
You as always.
Thanks for taking the time to be with us. And we are speaking just hours after news broke that President Donald Trump will be the first sitting president to attend the March for Life. We're less than 24 hours from that taking place, and you are also going to be on that rally stage at the March for Life. I know you've met the president before in the White House. First off, I just want to get your reaction to this news.
I feel like I can't control my face right now, even hearing you talk about it. It is humbling to know that I will be there when the first president in history will be taking the stage, and to be a part of that. I mean, no one but God. Think back to how 2019 started, right? With all of that aggressive abortion legislation and all of the concerns we had. And I mean, to me, this just gives me hope to know that in the midst of whatever happens, God's will is being done.
Melissa, from my perspective, you mentioned 2019. It seemed like 2019 was an incredibly busy year for you, and I'm sure it was because of the news that we saw very early on. And it seems that really picked up after Virginia Governor Ralph Northam made those comments that sounded like a defense of infanticide. And I want to kind of go back to those comments. Northam, who himself is a pediatric neurosurgeon, told a Washington radio station, quote, "The infant would be delivered, the infant would be kept comfortable, the infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired, and then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother." Melissa, again, as an abortion attempt survivor yourself, what was your reaction upon hearing that?
Horrified, disgusted, to be perfectly honest. And to me personally, it brought back all those words my parents had been told years ago. You know, my adoptive parents had been told I had been laid aside. And, you know, way back when the Washington Post was saying, well, you know, you can't prove that. Governor Northam just spoke the words that my parents heard 42 years ago. To me, that's pretty big proof. And we hear those words echoed throughout history for other abortion survivors. You know, I think we can credit Governor Northam and others in his party who have actually made our job a little bit easier on the life issue, right? They are letting honesty seep out whether they want to or not.
When you share your story, Melissa, what kind of reaction do you get from people? I mean, do people know that there are abortion attempt survivors such as yourself? And I imagine a growing amount given that these abortions are happening later and later on in pregnancies.
Yeah, you're so right. The later we see that line being pushed for abortion, the more the likelihood is going to be that a survivor like me comes into this world, which to me indicates why we need born alive legislation so much more now than we did ever before. And I think people are starting to know. Through the Abortion Survivors Network, we've been connected with over 300 abortion survivors now. We're now an affiliate of Pro-Love Ministries, which is part of Abby Johnson and her team's work. And so people are going to see more and more survivors, hear our stories. We're unveiling a huge media project that's called Face the Choice that is going to allow people to come face to face with what our world has called a choice for far too long. We know every human being is more than a choice.
Melissa, when we first sat down together 3 years ago now, you had just recently met your birth mother for the first time. Catch us up to speed. What is that relationship like today?
Amazing. She's a huge part of my life. When I released my book, initially, there was one big detail about her life that we didn't share. And that is that my birth mother lives in the same city that I do. If people don't know my story, they can read about it in my book, You Carried Me. But I moved from one city where my birth father was living to then moving to Kansas City, where I didn't know that my birth mother lives. And so does one of my half-sisters. And back then, right, we were still wanting to protect her. And she is the one who had started to share that detail. And I'm so proud of her. She is bold and courageous and strong. People are going to see her very soon. I interviewed her earlier this year, talking about her experience, because it's just time. It's time that our culture hears the stories of women like me who survive abortions. It's time that they hear stories of women like my birth mother who were forced or coerced or regret their abortion. Our culture has buried our stories for too long. And so you're going to get to see Ruth very soon.
I'm so grateful for your voice and your witness. Melissa Ohden, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
That does it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Until next time, be sure to reach us at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com or connect with us on social media. Just search for EWTN Pro-Life on all the major platforms. And remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.